The dust on Tantalus V was a special kind of annoying. It was not like sand. It was fine and pale, and it got into everything. Sergeant Jin-Soo Kim could feel it grinding between the joints of his loader's harness. He stood under the blinding white sun, watching the supply barge settle onto the landing pad with a tired groan of metal. His world was small, and it was made of small things. The checklist on his wrist tablet, the low battery warning on his scanner, the dry taste on his tongue. The Terran colonial regulars did not get the fancy postings. They got the rocks like Tantalus V, a mining outpost so poor the Galactic Council barely remembered its name. Inside the main habitat dome, Specialist Yoonji Park wiped sweat from her brow. Her console flickered.
Sergeant Kim?
The long-range array is acting up again. Getting ghost signals. Probably solar flares. Jin-Soo's voice crackled back over the comm, probably. Mark it and run the diagnostic. Again. It was always solar flares or dust in the receptors or a glitch in the aging council-provided satellite net. Nothing worked right on Tantalus. High above, in the clean, quiet orbit of the Kithval Gleam, Commander Valtharn observed the human outpost. On his screen, it was a collection of gray blobs against the orange rock. Their movements were slow. Their technology was simple. Their single ship, the Steadfast, was a bulky, ugly thing of welded plates and primitive fusion drive. He tapped a claw on his report console. Asterisk, Tantalus V Garrison Report, Cycle 89. Human regular complement remains at 43. Activity, routine maintenance and mineral loading. No technological advancements observed. Their societal model appears one of bare subsistence. Conclusion. Biologically persistent, but operationally non-threatening. A footnote to the galactic community. Asterisk, he sent the report. It vanished into the Council's vast data stream. One more forgettable entry. Down in the dust, Jin-Soo's world shifted. It started as a vibration in his boots. Then a low, deep rumble that seemed to come from the planet's bones. A Tantalus quake. Not big enough to crack the world, but more than enough to break the fragile things humans built that a siren wailed. A short, choking sound before the power flickered. Jin-Soo was already running, his squad falling in behind him without a word. They did not panic. Panic was a waste of energy. The problem was already here. The water reclamation plant was a disaster. A main pipe had burst, and a support beam had buckled, threatening to collapse part of the roof. Precious water dripped into the thirsty ground. In a place like Tantalus, this was a death sentence in a week. Jin-Soo assessed the damage. Minseek, get a seal on that pipe. Use the patch kit from the loader's emergency pack. Young-woo, brace that beam. Use anything solid you can find. He looked at the failing lights. Yoonji, we need power priority to life support and this site. Reroute it from the non-essential modules. The admin dome can sit in the dark. Yoonji nodded, her fingers flying over her mobile tablet. The Council satellite net is showing increased tectonic activity in the sector. Useless now. I can borrow a feed from the Kithral Geological Survey satellite. It has better sensors. Will they notice? Jin-Soo asked, already helping Young-woo lift a bent metal panel. Maybe, but I need the ground stability data to shore up the foundation here, or your patch will just blow again in an hour. Do it, Jin-Soo said. The rule was simple. Survive first, ask for forgiveness never. They worked through the planet's long night. They used parts from a broken or conveyor to make a new brace. They mixed a sealant from chemical stores meant for repairing habitat walls. Jin-Soo shared his flask of bitter, cold coffee. There was no grand speech, just quiet, stubborn work. Private Minseek, the youngest, started humming an old song. No one told him to stop. Yoonji, from her console, guided them. The borrowed feed shows the shifting is settling. Your foundation plan will hold. For now. By the time Tantalus's sun rose, the water plant was functional. It was not pretty. It had a crooked beam and a pipe wrapped in 3 different kinds of tape. But the water was flowing. The outpost would live.in orbit. Valtharn received an automated alert. Asterisk, unauthorized access to Kithral Survey Satellite G77. Source, Tantalus v. Human Outpost. Asterisk, he almost dismissed it as petty theft of data. But another alert followed. Disaster event. Tectonic shift. Human infrastructure. Minor damage. Recovery status. Complete. He pulled up the visual logs. He saw the humans working in the dark, illuminated by their own vehicle lights. He saw them use junk to fix critical systems. He saw no screaming, no evident despair. Just work. His claw hesitated over his report console. The words from his earlier entry seemed foolish now. He deleted non-threatening. He wrote instead, exhibited unexpected resilience and rapid, adaptive problem-solving. Violated council data protocols to achieve objective. Recommend further observation. Their capacity for degraded operation continuity is notable. He did not understand the chill he felt. They had just fixed a pipe, but they had fixed it in the dark with junk and had the audacity to steal his satellite's eyes to do it better. It felt less like repair and more like a quiet, fundamental refusal to break. On the surface, Jinsu watched the first clear water trickle into the storage tank. He took a long drink, tasted of dust and metal, tasted like another day survived. He looked at his tired, dirty squad. Good work. Now get some rest. The supply barge still needs unloading. The day, like every day, went on. The report from Tantalus V, along with thousands of others, flowed into the heart of the Galactic Council. It arrived at the Citadel, a place of calm light and quiet halls. Here, the problems of the galaxy were sorted, studied, and filed away. One of those who studied was Kiera. She was Zelnara, a species that lived long and saw patterns where others saw noise. Her work was to look at the small reports, the ones from backwater places, to find the first whisper of a storm. She read Commander Valtharn's update. The words were dry. Unexpected resilience. Adaptive problem-solving. Violated data protocols. But Kiera did not just read words. She reviewed the attached data, the visual logs from the planet below. She watched the humans work on the broken water plant. She saw no panic. She saw the shared flask. She saw the private who hummed. She saw the specialist access a Kithral satellite without a second thought. She noted the time. The repair was done too fast. Far too fast for a technologically rudimentary species. A quiet alarm rang in her mind. She opened other files. She searched for other reports on human regulars. She found one from the icy world of Norden 7. A human transport had crashed in a blizzard. The council expected to recover bodies. But when a patrol found them weeks later, the humans were alive. They had built shelters from the wreckage. They had melted ice for water with pieces of the ship's broken engine. They had used the crashed ship's communication wiring to make fishing lines for the native iceworms. The report called it a remarkable survival story. Kiera saw something else. She found another from the jungle world of Viridia Prime. A human survey team's equipment had failed due to the damp and heat. Their energy weapons corroded. The council lost contact, assuming they were dead. Then, a year later, a perfectly functional signal beacon pulsed from their last known location. A rescue ship found them. They had built a camp. They had created simple but effective bows and traps from local materials. They had even managed to repair their water purifier using acidic fruit juice and crushed minerals. The report noted their primitive adaptability. Kiera's eyes narrowed. She went back to the Tantalus V data. She watched Sergeant Jinsu Kim. He did not look like a great leader from council stories. He looked tired. He gave simple orders. But when he moved, his people moved. When he pointed, they fixed. There was no single moment of heroism. It was a constant, steady push against the chaos of the universe. She began to compile a new document. Not a report, a profile. The title was Degraded Operation Continuity, the Human Standard. She wrote her analysis. Human elite forces were well known. They had special armor, powerful ships, impressive weapons. The council feared them. They were a sharp, clear knife. But the regulars were not a knife. They were a kind of glue. Their technology was not the best, but it was built to be fixed. Their soldiers were not the strongest, but they were taught to think. Their units did not rely on one leader. Every member could lead if they had to. They could take chaos and make order from it. Not perfect order. Functional order. Patched pipe. A shelter from wreckage. A bough from a tree. They did this not as something special but as something normal. It was their standard way of being. Down on Tantalus V, Sergeant Jinsu was running a training simulation. His squad was in a dim room, screens showing a broken cityscape. The scenario was simple. Communications dead, weapons low on ammunition, extraction point 20 kilometers away through enemy ground. Comms are gone, Jinsu said. Your maps are fried. Figure it out. The squad grumbled but got to work. Private Young Woo, who was always quiet, spoke up. The stars. We can use the stars. And the position of Tantalus's moons. He started explaining, using a stick to draw in the dust on the floor. Yoonji chimed in. If we can get to high ground, I might be able to rig a short-range signal from my scanner's power cell. We could call for a different pickup. They argued. They made wrong turns on the simulation. Private Minsik suggested a risky shortcut through a canyon. They debated it for a full minute. Then they tried it. It worked. Jinsu watched, his arms crossed. He did not give them the answers. He let them argue, let them fail, let them find the way. When they finally reached the extraction point in the sim, he simply nodded. Acceptable. Hit the showers. Real work starts in an hour. To him, it was a boring Tuesday. To Kira, watching a recorded version of this standard training exercise, it was a key to the dread she was starting to feel. She saw no single hero. She saw a network. Youngwoo was a navigator. Yoonji was a signaler. Minsik was a risk-taker. Jinsu was the one who let them be all those things. They were a system. If one part failed, the others adjusted. The council feared the human dagger. Kira now feared the human net. A dagger could be caught or broken. A net once thrown was hard to escape. And these humans were throwing their net over every rock they landed on. They were not conquering. They were sticking. She finished her profile and sent it to her superior. It would be read. Maybe it would be understood. She looked back at the live feed from Tantalus V. The humans were unloading the supply barge, moving in the dust. They looked ordinary. That, she realized, was the most frightening thing of all. The sky over Tantalus V began to burn. It was not an attack. It was a natural event. A meteor shower the Council's long-range sensors had noted but deemed insignificant for a world with a proper shield grid. The human outpost did not have a proper shield grid. Jinsu stood outside the habitat dome, his helmet off, watching the streaks of light tear across the violet twilight. They were beautiful in a deadly way. He heard Yoonji's voice in his earpiece, calm but tight. Sergeant, the larger debris field is coming in closer than predicted. I recommend moving all personnel to the central shelters. Make the call, Jinsu said, already turning to gather his squad. The regulars moved without panic, a well-practiced flow towards the reinforced storage bays. Above the chaos, in the quiet of the Kithval gleam, Commander Valtharn watched the sensor display. Alerts flashed. Debris density was high. The human outpost was a tiny, fragile dot on the screen. One of his junior officers, a young Kithril named Theras, was piloting a patrol skiff near the planet's atmosphere, running a routine scan. Theras was nervous. The meteor shower was messing with his sensors, creating ghost images and static on the ground. A team led by Private Minsik was welding a support for a communication tower that had shaken loose in the quake. The bright blue-white flare of the welding torch shot into the darkening sky, and his skiff. Theras saw a sudden, sharp energy spike on his screen, mixed with the debris static. His training faltered. The fear of an attack of a human weapon firing on him overrode his logic. He did not wait for confirmation. He followed his panic. His claw hit the weapon control. A single, low-yield plasma bolt streaked down from the heavens. It missed the humans by 300 meters. It did not miss the outpost's main power generation building. The world turned white, then black. A sound like the end of everything shook the ground. When Jinsu's vision cleared, he was on his back. The light was gone. every light. The only illumination came from the burning crater where the fusion reactor used to be, and from the dying streaks of fire in the sky. Silence lasted for 3 full seconds. Then the emergency battery lights flickered on, casting long, terrible shadows. A low groan of metal echoed. The air recyclers wheezed and stopped. Yunji's voice was the first thing in his ear, crackling with static. Main reactor is gone. Total loss. Backup batteries at 60%. Life support failing in 8 hours. Jinsu pushed himself up. His body ached. He clicked on his helmet light. The beam cut through the dust and smoke. He saw his squad getting up, checking each other for injuries. No one screamed. They just started assessing, their own helmet lights switching on one by one, little dots of defiance in the sudden dark. Then Valtharn's voice, cold and formal, came over the general channel. Human Outpost Tantalus V. You have suffered a catastrophic failure due to natural phenomena. You are advised to cease operations and formally request Council humanitarian aid. Your infrastructure has proven fragile. Jinsu looked at the burning wreckage. He looked at the faces of his squad, lit by the flames. He felt a cold anger, not hot. It was a solid thing. He keyed his mic. We read you, Kithval Gleam. We'll manage. He turned off the channel. He looked at his people. Right, he said, his voice dry. Let's see what we've got. That was all he said. It was enough. The shift was immediate and total. Yunji was already pulling panels off a secondary console, hunting for wiring. Youngwoo and Minsik were running toward the burning reactor building, not to flee, but to see what could be saved. The real story was not in Jinsu's order. It was in what happened without orders. Private Minsik, remembering the heat from the welding torch, shouted about using the reactor's own molten slag as a heat source. Youngwoo started directing others to pull undamaged insulation tiles from the habitat walls. Someone dragged out the old, printed manuals for the life support systems. They worked like a single animal with many hands. They used the wreckage to fix the wreckage. They pulled piping from the ruined plant to create a new thermal exchange loop. They built a crude, ugly battery from the reactor's still-hot core and the insulation tiles, buying 12 more hours of air. Yunji sat at a dead console, her portable tablet linked to a jury-rigged power cell. I sent a distress pulse, she said, to the Steadfast's last known course. She's 3 weeks out at best. She looked up, her face smudged with soot. I also sent a data packet, all sensor logs from the last hour, including the origin of that plasma bolt. Jinsu just nodded. Proof could wait. Survival was now. He watched his people work. They were tired and scared, but they were not helpless. They were turning chaos into a plan, one piece of scrap at a time. In orbit, Valtharn received the automated alert about the distress call. He also, a moment later, received a heavily encrypted packet from the Zelnara analyst Kira. It contained one line of text. Observe their response. This is the pattern. He watched the thermal and activity feeds from the planet. He saw the human life signs, clustered not in despair, but around the burning wreckage. He saw them building something. He saw them moving with purpose in the dark. They were not waiting for rescue. They were engineering it, from their own ruin. The dread he had felt before returned, colder and deeper. They were supposed to be broken. They were supposed to call for help. Instead, they had turned a death sentence into a technical problem. And they were solving it. The chamber was silent. It was a place of soft light and smooth walls, made for calm discussion. The beings gathered here were some of the oldest and wisest in the Galactic Council. Today, they were not calm. The Zelnara analyst Kira stood in the center. Before her, holograms glowed. They did not show battles or great explosions. They showed simple things. One hologram showed Sergeant Jinsu Kim and his squad fixing the water pipe on Tantalus V. Another showed humans on the ice world Norden 7, building a shelter from a crashed ship's hull. A third showed the jungle of Viridia Prime and the clever traps made from vines and wood. This, Kira said, her voice clear and quiet, is not a weapons report. This is a cultural analysis. You have all seen the data on human elite forces, their advanced ships, their powerful armor. You fear these? This is a mistake. She changed the display. Now it showed the recent events on Tantalus V. The meteor shower, the Kithral plasma bolt, the total blackout. Then it showed the thermal images from the next few hours. Little dots of heat moving around the wrecked reactor. They were not running away. They were pulling it apart. You fear the sharp, clean knife, Kiera continued. But humanity does not send a knife to live on a new world. They send glue. They send a patch. They send Sergeant Jin-Soo Kim. The hologram zoomed in on the humans around the hot reactor slag. It showed them building the ugly thermal battery. It showed Yoonji rewiring a console with parts from a broken scanner. It showed Private Minsik explaining his idea about heat to the others. Observe, Kiera said. There is no single leader here. The sergeant gives a direction. Then the private has an idea. The specialist makes it work. They argue. They try. They fail and try again. They are not a hierarchy. They are a network. A living system. An elder from a reptilian species shifted. They are merely resilient. Many species are resilient. No, Kiera said firmly. Resilience is bouncing back. This is not bouncing. This is spreading. Look at this. The image changed. It showed the Kithral ground garrison on Tantalus from earlier that same day. A human private was showing a Kithral cook how to use a condensed food pack, adding local spices to make it taste better. Another showed a human soldier fixing a stuck hinge on a Kithral shuttle door with a piece of flexible wire. Before the disaster, they were already doing it. They were not sharing military secrets. They were sharing life tricks. Ways to make the bad food taste okay. Ways to fix a noisy door. They are making this awful, dusty rock feel more like a home. And they are teaching everyone around them how to do it too. She let the silence hang. The elders looked at the images of simple friendship, of shared fixes. Your fear is misplaced, Kiera said, her final point landing softly. Their elite forces might take a planet, but their regulars, they keep it. They turn any ground, however hostile, into human ground. Not by force of arms, but by force of habit. They do not conquer the environment. They befriend it, repair it, and stubbornly live in it. In a century, the planets they occupy will not be military bases. They will be homes. And those homes will be defended not by fleets, but by the grandchildren of the soldiers who first fixed the plumbing. The truth settled into the room like a cold weight. A knife could be taken away. A bomb could be disarmed. How do you disarm a people who turn disaster into a simple job? How do you stop a culture that sees a broken reactor not as an end, but as a source of spare parts? A military threat could be met with a bigger military. This was different. This was a slow, patient, unstoppable way of being. The human regulars were a virus of practicality, and they were already spreading on the Kithval Gleam. Commander Valtharn received a new priority order from the Council. It was marked, urgent, containment. The words were clear. The human contingent is to be isolated. Limit all interaction. Do not allow them to share techniques or materials. Do not let them improvise further. Their adaptive practices are a contagion. You are to contain the problem until a diplomatic solution can be reached. Valtharn read the order, then looked at his own ship's internal logs. He saw that 2 of his junior engineers had accessed the human's makeshift thermal battery schematics, curious about the design. He saw that the cook had requested more of the human's spice mix. The order was too late. The contagion was already here. It had not come through weapons or threats. It had come through a shared meal and a fixed door. The dread was now a certainty. He was not guarding prisoners. He was trying to hold back a tide with his bare hands, and the water was already seeping through his fingers. A month passed on Tantalus V. The sky was its usual empty blue, the dust as pale as ever. But the outpost was different. It stood, patched and mended, like a piece of old clothing repaired many times. The new fusion reactor, brought by the lumbering human freighter Steadfast, sat where the old one had been destroyed. It hummed with a clean, new sound. Sergeant Jin-Soo Kim stood on the landing pad, his gear packed at his feet. His squad was around him, their faces clean for the first time in weeks. They were being rotated out. A new group of regulars was already moving in, nodding to them as they passed. The work would continue. Jinsu looked at the habitat dome. Near its south side, a patch of darker soil was visible. Someone, maybe Private Minsik, had planted seeds from their vegetable rations near the heat vents. Little green shoots were pushing through the tantalus dust. It was a small, stupid thing, but it looked like a promise. Commander Valtharn descended from a sleek Kithril shuttle. His feathers were perfectly smooth, his uniform crisp. He walked across the dusty pad, stopping a few feet from Jinsu. The two leaders looked at each other. The human sergeant in his worn, patched suit. The avian commander in his spotless armor. No words of apology were spoken. The incident report had been filed away by the council as a regrettable accident during a natural disaster. Nothing more. Valtharn did not speak about the report. He looked past Jinsu, at the repaired structures, at the new reactor, at the green shoots in the dust. His eyes finally settled back on the sergeant. "Your thermal battery," Valtharn said, his voice clipped. "The one you made from the reactor slag. My engineers examined the design. It was inefficient, but it worked. The schematics were not in your standard database. Where did the design come from?" Jinsu looked tired, but his eyes were calm. He thought for a moment, remembering the long night in the dark, the heat on their faces. "The battery?" Jinsu shrugged. "It was a small human motion. That wasn't a design, sir." "Not really." He nodded toward Private Minsik, who was adjusting his pack. Private Minsik, there. He grew up in a city called Busan on Earth, by the sea. His grandfather kept a cellar full of kimchi pots, spicy fermented vegetables. To keep them at the right temperature all year, the old man used a trick. He buried the pots next to a heat source, with special stones and straw for insulation. Made a kind of earth oven. Jinsu looked back at the spot where their crude battery had been. When the reactor blew, the slag was hot. Minsik remembered the kimchi cellar. He said, "What if we make a big pot, but for heat, not food?" So we did. We used what we had. We just scaled it up. Valtharn stood very still. He had expected an answer about engineering, about stolen data or secret human science. He did not expect this. He did not expect a food preservation memory from a seaside city on a distant world to be the key to survival on Tantalus V. This was the thing that Kiera had warned them about. This was the dread made real. It was not a weapon. It was a grandparent's memory, carried in the mind of a homesick soldier, and turned into a tool for living. The human elite forces might have a manual for that. The regulars just had their lives. Jinsu's comm buzzed. The Steadfast was ready for boarding. He hoisted his pack onto his shoulder. His squad fell in behind him. "Good luck with the dust, Commander," Jinsu said. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't an insult either. It was just a fact of the place. Valtharn watched them walk up the ramp into the dark, ugly belly of the human freighter. The ship was slow. It was unimpressive. But it had come, 3 weeks later, and it had brought what was needed. As the ship lifted off on columns of simple fire, Valtharn did not look at the departing soldiers. He turned his back on the ship. He looked instead at the outpost they had left behind. He saw the repairs, each one a little ugly but functional. He saw the new vegetable patch. He heard, from the open door of the Kithril garrison's kitchen, the sound of one of his own troopers whistling. It was a tune he did not know. It was the work song Jinsu's squad had hummed while they worked. The dread settled in his bones, cold and final. The humans had not waged war. They had not even demanded justice. They had simply done what they always did. They had fixed the broken things. They had planted seeds in the dust. They had shared a song. And in doing so, they had changed Tantalus V forever. They had left their mark not on the planet, but on the idea of it. It was no longer just a rock. It was a place where humans had lived, and because they had lived, it was a little more alive. The galaxy's true humanity, fuck yeah moment was not a victory in battle. It was the terrifying, simple fact of their stubborn, everyday will to make a home, wherever they were. And as the Steadfast vanished into the stars, Commander Valtharn knew, with absolute certainty, that the Council's fear was justified. You could beat an army. How do you beat that? Commander Valtharn stood on the landing pad long after the human ship was gone. The dust settled where its engines had scorched the rock. The quiet that returned was not the same quiet as before. It was filled with the hum of the new reactor and the faint, unfamiliar whistle from his own kitchen. He walked back into the main Kithral command pod. The air was filtered and cool, a stark contrast to the outside. His officers sat at their stations, their postures perfect, their screens glowing with orderly data. But their eyes flickered to him, waiting. The containment order from the Council was clear. It was also, he now understood, impossible. "Sir," his junior communications officer said, "the Council inquires if the human departure is complete and if the cultural contamination has been assessed." Valtharn looked at the young officer. He thought of the human private, Minsik, explaining his grandfather's kimchi cellar, a secret weapon made from a food memory. "Inform the Council that the human contingent has departed," Valtharn said, his voice flat, "and that the outpost is secure." It was the truth, but it felt like a lie. The outpost was physically secure. What it was filled with now was something no security protocol could erase. He walked to the viewport. Below, he could see the human habitat dome. A small, flickering light was moving near the new vegetable patch. One of his own troopers, a mechanic named Kale, was down there with a portable lamp, not on duty. Curiosity had overcome orders. Valtharn did not call him back. He watched. Down at the patch, Kale knelt in the dust. He was not alone. Private Minsik had not boarded the Steadfast. He had been reassigned to stay behind for 1 week to help the new human squad with the handover. Officially, it was a technical liaison. Unofficially, he was a seed left behind. Minsik pointed at the green shoots. "You see? They need a little water, but not too much. The heat from the vents at night is good for them. Like the cellar." Kale, his avian head tilted, asked a practical question. "But the soil is bad. It has no life. How do they grow?" Minsik smiled. He reached into a small bag and pulled out a packet. "We brought some soil from home. Just a little. You mix it in. It has the right tiny life in it. Then, when these plants are done, they make the soil here a little better for the next ones." He sprinkled a handful of dark, rich earth into the pale dust. It was such a small act. But to Valtharn, watching from above, it was a declaration. The humans were not just living on Tantalus V. They were terraforming it, in the quietest, slowest way possible. One handful of soil at a time. They were teaching the galaxy how to do it with them. A week later, Minsik finally left. The new human sergeant was a woman named Hannah, who had the same tired, practical eyes as Jean Sue. The handover was simple. She listened. She nodded. She asked about water quotas and dust filter maintenance. It was boring. It was normal. The Kithval Gleam received its orders to move to a new sector. As the ship prepared to break orbit, Valtharn requested the latest reports from the planetary sensors. One report was about atmospheric composition. It noted a minuscule, statistically insignificant increase in oxygen and organic particles near the human outpost. The cause was listed as probable sensor error. Another was a log from the ground garrison. It listed non-regulation cultural exchanges. It included the shared meal recipes. It included the borrowed technique for fixing screeching door hinges with a wire loop. It included the whistled tune that 2 Kithral troopers now hummed while performing maintenance. Valtharn closed the files. He looked at the planet below, a rusty ball against the black. It looked the same as it had a year ago, but it was not. The humans had been there. They had left their stubbornness in the repaired structures. They had left their adaptability in the minds of his own people. They had left their life in a patch of green shoots and imported soil. The Galactic Council feared the story of the heroic, unstoppable human warrior. That was a story they could understand. They could build a bigger weapon to counter it. But this was not that story. This was the story of the boring, regular human who fixed the pipe. The story of the soldier who remembered his grandfather's kitchen. The story of a people who treated every new world, Not as a conquest, but as a future home that just needed some work. That story had no enemy to fight. It had only the slow, patient work of tomorrow. And that story, Valthar knew, was already spreading. It was in the soil of Tantalus V. It was in the whistle of a Kithral mechanic. It was in the dread in his own heart that as the stars stretched into lines and the Kithval gleam leapt into the faster-than-light stream. The last thing Valtharn thought was not of fleets or battles. It was of a single, resilient green shoot, pushing its way up through the alien dust, under a borrowed light. The humans had not won a war. They had simply decided to stay, and in doing so they had changed everything. The Council's dread was real, but it was too late. The regulars had already dug in. The Steadfast was a week into its journey. Inside, it smelled of recycled air, machine oil, and the faint, ever-present scent of the yeast-based protein everyone called ship bread. Sergeant Jin-Soo Kim sat in the small mess hall, a cup of lukewarm coffee in his hand. Around him, his squad was quiet. They were tired in a deep way, the kind that sleep on a rocking ship couldn't fix. It was the tiredness that comes after holding something together for too long. Private Young-woo was looking at a photo on his tablet, a picture of his family's apartment balcony in Seoul, crowded with potted plants. Specialist Yoonji Park was methodically taking apart a damaged data pad, cleaning each component with a careful focus. Private Minsik was just staring at the wall, his mind clearly still back on the dust of Tantalus V that NO1 celebrated. They had survived. That was the job. There was no medal for fixing a pipe or building a battery from junk. The story of what happened would be written in a dry after-action report and filed away. The plasma bolt from the Kithral would be a navigation hazard incident. Their survival would be successful execution of degraded environment protocols. The words would make it all sound like a simulation. It hadn't felt like a simulation. "Do you think the plants will live?" Minsik asked, not looking at anyone. Jin-Soo took a slow sip. "Maybe. The next squad will check on them. Hannah knows how to care for things." Yoonji slotted a clean circuit board back into her datapad. "I uploaded all the sensor logs to the ship's core. The origin trace of that bolt is perfect. The Council can't argue with it." "They won't argue," Jin-Soo said. "They'll just call it something else. A mistake. An error. They don't want to fight over a rock like Tantalus." "So it was for nothing?" Young-woo asked, putting his tablet down. Jin-Soo looked at him, then at each of them. He saw the frustration. They had worked, they had almost died, and it would be erased by politics. "No," Jin-Soo said, his voice low and firm. "It wasn't for nothing. The outpost is still there. The air is on. The water is clean. The new squad has a place to sleep that isn't broken." He paused. "And the Kithral down there know that we fixed their mess without their help. They saw us do it. That's not nothing. That's a fact. You can't delete a fact." He wasn't talking about winning. He was talking about existing, about proving, through sheer stubborn action, that they could not be easily erased. Their victory was not in a treaty. It was in the continued hum of a reactor on a dead world. Back on Tantalus V, Sergeant Hannah walked the perimeter. The new squad was young, eager, a little nervous. She showed them the patched pipe, the spot where the thermal battery had been. She showed them the vegetable patch. "This is what we do," she told them. Her voice as practical as Jin-Soo's had been. "We find what's broken. We fix it with what we have. We leave it better than we found it. Not perfect. Better." One of the new privates, a young woman named June, pointed to the Kithral garrison in the distance. "What about them? The orders say to limit contact." Hannah looked at the sleek alien structures. She thought of the whistling she'd heard from their kitchen vent. "Be polite. Be professional. If they ask you a question, answer it. If you see a problem they have and you can fix it safely, you fix it. Don't wait for orders. Just do the job." It was the same doctrine. The unspoken, everyday doctrine of the regulars. Help. Fix. Persist. It was not aggression. It was a relentless kind of friendship, offered even to those who might not want it.in the Citadel. Analyst Kiera reviewed the final reports from the Tantalus V incident. The official council summary was exactly as Jinsu predicted. A regrettable accident, smoothed over by diplomatic channels. The humans were not making a formal complaint. They were just moving on. But Kira also accessed the internal feed from the Kithral garrison, now back under council control. She saw the notes from their kitchen about the human spice mix. She saw the maintenance log that now included the wire hinge fix. She saw the unofficial, growing library of human field adaptations. She did not write another warning. It was too late for warnings. Instead, she began a new file. She titled it, The Tantalus Model Projected Long-Term Cultural Integration Scenarios. Her first line read, Containment has failed. The human regular is not a soldier who occupies. They are a neighbor who repairs. You cannot purge a neighbor. You can only learn to live with them. And in learning, you become more like them. She projected forward 50 years. The green shoots would be vines. The repaired structures would be foundations for new ones. The Kithral who served there would retire, taking their new knowledge with them. The story of the stubborn humans who wouldn't die would become a quiet legend. The humans themselves wouldn't see it as legend. For Sergeant Jinsu Kim, drifting on the Steadfast, it was just another day. He finished his coffee. He stood up. All right, he said to his squad. We've got gear to clean and inventory to run. The work doesn't stop just because we're moving. They nodded. They got up. They followed him. There was another rock somewhere that would need its pipes fixed. Another patch of dust waiting for a seed. The regulars were going, ready to do the same simple, world-changing things all over again. The galaxy could dread them or learn from them, but it could not stop them. They were already on their way.